Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today we are taking a look at this article here, and I know it's a few days old, but I think there's some good arguments to be made. Is why James Gunn is right about theaters versus streaming and TV. James Gunn says people see movies primarily on streaming won't impact their legacy since it's always been TV that makes movies last. He's right, and right off the bat, before we even dive into this, he is. Now, before we really do dive into this, I know that recently he's been personally named in a lawsuit involving certain acts that I'm not going to mention here, but I am truly a believer of we need to separate the arguments from the person making them, because I do think that there are some great points here. And I've really made, I think I've made, about 4 or 5 videos on this theaters versus streaming debate so far. So it's one of those, like, for me personally, I just want to put this debate to bed. So let's go ahead and let's tear right into this article here. James Gunn is exactly right when he says big streaming releases aren't a huge problem because movies last because people can watch them at home, not just in theaters. The coronavirus pandemic threw the movie theater industry into disarray, further shifting big movie releases like The Suicide Squad away from the big screen onto streaming. While theaters and the big screen will always be a fixture in movie-going culture, thanks to a shrinking box office, they won't always be the biggest place to see movies. The advent of streaming, and especially the growth in big budget streaming releases like the Tomorrow War, that was Amazon, and Army of the Dead, that was Netflix, combined with showing theatrical exclusive windows, has created a lot of conversation about big screen movies versus small screen movies, which in most cases are mostly arbitrary points. Movies are movies, and while bigger screens and louder sound can certainly elevate a movie, the line between movies made for theater and movies made for home viewing isn't nearly so clear as it was in the day where non-theatrical films were almost all low-budget, straight-to-video B movies, and they're not wrong. There was a time you could you could watch any movie from Troma or Full Moon and go, yeah, this is straight-to-video B movie garbage. But I would say that the tide has actually been turning ever since the mid-2000s with regards to direct-to-video movies. And I'm not talking about those crappy Disney direct-to-video movies where they intentionally made them super low budget. But yeah, exactly. And this was always going to be the case with regards to streaming, is that now the lines are going to get more and more blurred. But let's just go on before I tangent on for too long. The post-pandemic reopening of movie theaters and same-day streaming releases has changed the way we see theatrical releases, with some movies intended for blockbuster theatrical experiences being viewed primarily by huge audiences at home as the box office struggles to recover. Studios like Warner Brothers say they're returning to theatrical exclusive releases in 2022, but the streaming shift won't totally go away, especially with shorter exclusive windows, meaning the way we consume movies as a culture will never be the same, but in some ways will be the same as it ever was. And I remember a time when you had all of these doom and gloomers coming out. This was back in like 2010, and it was the release of a little movie called Alice in Wonderland starring Johnny Depp. And that movie made headlines because that movie was released in theaters, and then 3 months later it hit home video. Now, today, that's actually a rather common practice, but back then, that was unorthodox. You know, if you wanted to see a movie, you went to go see the movie in the theater because the movie was not going to come out to home video for at least 6 to 8 months. And God help you if you wanted to watch a Christmas movie, something like The Polar Express or Jim Carrey's A Christmas Carol, because that one, you're waiting damn near a year for that to come out on home video. But anyways, let's go into the article's first point here. The first argument is box office was going away before the pandemic. Well, no fucking shit. I have highlighted this in almost all other videos that I've made on this subject, but I guess we're gonna have to bring it up yet again. The biggest elephant in the room the biggest elephant in the room with this topic is the fact that the ticket sales are drying up and have been for some time. While box office revenue has increased for some studios in recent years before the pandemic, the numbers of tickets being sold every year has actually been in decline for 2 decades. Yes, if you actually look, it really started around 1999 to 2000, and it never really went up. There was never really an uptick. It's just been on a gradual decline on any graph that you see. With theater attendance hitting an all-time low in 2017, the box office was being held afloat by the price increases, which isn't viable long-term. Yeah, I hate to break this to you, but I don't think people are going to be willing to pay 20, $25 to go see a movie on the big screen. Fuck that, I'll just wait for it to come out on Blu-ray and I'll spend the $25 then. The decline started before the advent of streaming, but the increasing availability of inexpensive quality streaming TV and movies at home has surely had an impact. It likely started with TV screens getting bigger and cheaper, and home video being available on high quality formats at video rental stores in the late 90s, with the share of screen time at home only increasing yearly leading into the streaming boom. Yes, ever since the advent of DVD, I would never have made the argument with VHS, because there is a clear difference between watching a movie on the big screen and watching a VHS copy of it. You know, VHS was never that high of quality, but ever since DVD came out, it's really harder it really became harder to tell the difference for a lot of people. So how many people just said, fuck it, I'll wait for it to come out on DVD and then I'll watch the movie then. But here's the second argument that they're making, is that streaming is more profitable than the box office. Now, personally, I think that this argument is really debatable, because we truly don't know how profitable it is, because services like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Disney Plus, they love hiding their numbers. So you can make the argument that sure, maybe streaming is more profitable than the box office, but it's something that we are never going to fully know unless if the streaming services become fully transparent, which I never see them doing, because they don't want to ruin that perception. Not only is streaming growing in popularity while theaters are shrinking, but streaming is far more profitable, especially for studios with their own streaming platform. Again, that is a matter of debate and something that no one can 100% definitively prove. Disney's industry record-shattering box office performance in 2019 brought the company just over $11 billion, with Disney movies accounting for 80% of 2019's biggest hits. But those heights are hard to achieve on a yearly basis due to release schedules of big blockbuster IP franchises, with the stars aligning in 2019. So 7 of Disney's movies, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, there you go. You had Avengers Endgame, that was the end of the MCU. Aladdin, The Lion King, Toy Story 4, Frozen 2, and Star Wars Rise of Skywalker grossing over $1 billion, and Avengers Endgame setting the all-time record at $2.8 billion gross at the time. I believe Avatar has taken the record back from them. Meanwhile, Netflix's yearly revenue first eclipsed $11 billion in 2017 and has only grown since, posting nearly $25 billion in revenue in 2020. Disney Plus revenue, of course, exceeded the pandemic box office in 2020 and won't only do so again in 2021, but also exceed its record 2019 box office haul as well. Streaming revenue isn't just bigger for studios than box office grosses either. Studios share around half their box office revenue with theaters, even more internationally. Yes, internationally, it varies from, it varies from market to market. So a safe assumption is always about 60% of the box office revenue goes to theaters. In China, it's actually 75%. Well, no, it's 75% goes to the CCP is what it is. Whereas they get to keep the lion's share of streaming revenue for their own content on their own platform, only sharing a small percentage with companies like Google or Amazon when their hardware is used to stream the movie. It doesn't take a big studio CEO to know massive revenue boosts and higher profit margins are a good combination. There's a reason Warner Media CEO Jason Kilar sees $1 billion streaming movie budget in the future. That one we are going to touch on in a future video, because that is something I would love to personally debunk. But let's get into the third and final argument of this article, and this is the real meat and potatoes of it here. The long-term impact of movies comes from home media and streaming. So movies are going more and more to streaming, but how will that impact the way we watch them and talk about them? This brings us back to James Gunn's quote, "Movies last because they're seen on television. Jaws isn't still a classic because people are watching in the theaters. I've never seen Jaws in a movie theater. It's one of my favorite movies." End quote. Jaws is a great reference for Gunn's point because it's old enough that most people never had the opportunity to see it in the theater, yet it's still widely regarded as one of the greatest films of all time. Yes, I guarantee you, if you're under the age of 50, unless if they brought Jaws back for some special screening, like a Fathom Events kind of thing, you never saw Jaws on the big screen. You saw it on television, on like the CBS Sunday night movie, or you rented it from fucking Blockbuster when it was on VHS. Let's be 100% honest. Blah, blah, blah. The same goes for many classics from Citizen Kane to The Godfather, or even some more modern movies like Fight Club, which bombed in the box office and gained a second life on DVD. The funny part is I always love it when people try to make the argument to me that Citizen Kane got snubbed at the Oscars when the movie How Green Was My Valley beat it for Best Picture. So now I feel obligated to give a little history lesson on Citizen Kane. Now, this is a story that is very, very well documented, so I don't feel the need to even put up any sources. But the reason why Citizen Kane didn't really land back when it originally released, I believe it was either 41 or 42. I don't remember the year. It was because of this guy right here on the screen right now. Now, most of you guys may not recognize this guy in this picture. That's because you're not supposed to. The man's name was William Randolph Hearst. For those who don't know, he was a newspaper mogul back in the 1930s and 40s, effectively controlling, I think it was around 80 to 90% of all the newspapers in the U.S. And Orson Welles was not shy about the fact that he based Charles Foster Kane off of William Randolph Hearst. And William Randolph Hearst was so upset by it, he basically made a threat to the theaters. It was something to the effect of, if you screen this movie in your theater, I will not allow you to advertise in any newspaper that I own. And with William Randolph Hearst controlling 80 to 90% of the newspapers in North America, kind of hard to justify going against him at the time. So I believe Citizen Kane was only shown in like 7 theaters when it initially released. It didn't become a massive hit until after William Randolph Hearst's death, and that is when the movie began appearing on television more and more. In fact, it wasn't listed as an American classic until the year 1964. More than, I think it was like 21 or 22 years after its initial release. So yeah, don't give me this bullshit that, streaming and television ruin a movie's legacy, when, like I said, again, if you're under the age of 50, you probably never saw Jaws on the big screen, unless if it was a special screening. Same with The Godfather. That came out in 1972. So truly anyone under the age of 50 probably never saw that on the big screen, with that exception of the Fathom Events. But let's get back into the article, because I've tangented for too long. Theaters have traditionally been a cultural touchstone for moviegoers, but they were also the primary or only way for a movie to make any money for most of that time. A movie may start a conversation when it hits theaters, but the home market determines if it's still talked about years later. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is a great modern analogy, where the movie made a big initial splash at the box office and certainly started conversations, but writer Chris Terrio says it was sabotaged by studio cuts. It was the release of the 3-hour Ultimate Edition, aka Zack Snyder's director's cut, that truly immortalized it with fans, keeping it in the conversation for years, serving as a major driving force behind the campaign for the Snyder Cut, which has become a Hollywood legend now despite only being released on streaming at the end of the day. There was a time when theaters were the only place most people could see movies, but the ability to watch, rewatch, pause, rewind, and truly pore over films at home redefined many people's relationship to cinema, falling in love with larger-than-life stories at home. While the theatrical experience may never return to what it once was, the home viewing experience will always be the primary way audiences build and maintain relationships with their favorite movies. And that's how the article ends. And truly be honest out there, if you are defending movie theaters, like, oh, movie theaters are the only true way to see a movie. If home video never existed, if VHS never came to be, how many of your absolute beloved movies would you have even bothered to watch? Would you have even seen Raiders of the Lost Ark without home video? Would you have even seen the original Star Wars trilogy without home video? Back to the Future, and all the original 20 James Bond movies. I don't consider the Daniel Craig movies as, true James Bond movies, but that's just me being a fucking snob. So yeah, that number would probably be about 80 to 90% of your favorite movies you probably would have never seen without home video. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this video right here because I think I've dragged this out as long as it needs to be. If you stuck out for this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me for a while, you know I am terrible at ending these videos, and I will just see you guys next time.